You wake up, no alarm, no schedule, no inbox, no place you have to be by 9. You lie still and listen. Somewhere close, a fire is being coaxed back to life. And the air smells like cold ash and morning. Nobody is shouting at you to get moving. For roughly 300,000 years, this was simply how a human day began. Now picture your own morning instead. The phone in your hand before your eyes are fully open. The mental list already running before your feet touch the floor. So sit with a strange question for a moment. If your ancestors had no jobs, no bosses, no clocks, and no calendars, what on earth did they do all day? The honest answer is going to bother you. Because for almost the entire human story, your ancestors had more free time than you do right now. That is not a romantic guess. It is something a man actually measured. In 1963, an anthropologist named Richard Lee went to live with the Jew, Hoansi, a hunter-gatherer people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. A hunter-gatherer is exactly what it sounds like, someone who gathers wild plants and hunts wild animals, which is how every single human being on Earth lived before farming was invented. Lee did something almost boringly simple. He followed people for weeks, and he timed how many hours they actually spent feeding themselves. The number stunned him. Adults spent somewhere between 15 and 20 hours a week on subsistence, the basic work of finding food and water and staying alive. Read that again. Not 15 hours a day. 15 hours a week, 2 or 3 hours of real effort, and the whole day's survival was taken care of. Maybe you think that was a fluke. One desert, one people, one lucky patch of years. So researchers went looking somewhere else entirely. The anthropologist Frank Marlowe spent years with the Hadza, hunter-gatherers living in the dry savanna of Tanzania, thousands of miles and a whole continent's worth of difference away. He found the very same shape of life, a few hours out foraging, then back to camp with most of the day still lying ahead of them. Then it got stranger. A scientist named Herman Pontzer fitted the Hadza with devices that measured exactly how much energy their bodies burned from one sunrise to the next. If anyone on Earth should be running themselves into the ground, surely it is people who walk miles to dig roots and chase game with handmade bows. But the Hadza burned roughly the same number of calories in a day as an office worker sitting at a desk in Chicago. Their lives were active, yes, but they were not a desperate, grinding fight for every last crumb. There was effort, and there was enormous, open space around the effort. One anthropologist gave that idea a name that stuck. In 1966, Marshall Sahlins called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. The word affluent usually makes you picture money and possessions. Sahlins meant the opposite kind of wealth. Your ancestors were rich in the one currency you cannot buy back, which is time. Their wants were few, the land around them gave enough, and so a full and satisfied life simply cost fewer hours than the life you are living costs you. So what filled all of those hours? This is where it stops being a statistic and starts being a life. Let us reconstruct a single ordinary day. You wake with the light, and because nothing is chasing you, you do not leap up. People surface slowly. They sit by the embers, they talk, they let the morning warm them before anything else happens. After a while, a group gathers up digging sticks and carrying bags and walks out to collect food. The tubers and nuts and berries and melons. The steady plant foods that quietly make up most of what anyone actually eats. The walk is not a chore to be rushed through. It is a long, winding conversation that happens to end with full bags. A few others go off to hunt. And here is something nobody tells you about hunting. It is thrilling, it is deeply skilled, and it mostly fails. A hunter can track an animal across the bush for an entire day and walk home with absolutely nothing. That is the whole reason the reliable food gathered by the rest of the group matters so much. The meat is the prize, but the plants are the reason anyone eats tomorrow. By the early afternoon, most people have drifted back into camp, and then what actually happens? Then, honestly, not much. And that is the part a modern mind can barely picture. The afternoon belongs to the shade, to repairing a tool, stringing a net, sharpening a wooden point. to wandering over to sit beside someone and say nothing in particular for an hour. The children are not shipped off to be taught by strangers inside a separate building. They roam in mixed-age packs, watching the adults, copying them, turning every real skill into a game long before they will ever need it for real. And when food does come in, it is shared out, all of it, across the whole group. Why would you ever hoard a dead antelope when there is no refrigerator and tomorrow's hunt might bring back nothing at all? Sharing here is not simple kindness. It is the smartest survival insurance ever invented. You feed others on the day you have plenty, so that they feed you on the day you come home empty-handed. There is also, strikingly, no boss anywhere in sight. Anthropologists call these groups egalitarian, which just means nobody ranks above anybody else. A man who starts strutting around handing out orders gets teased, mocked, and quietly cut back down to everyone else's size. Status is not something you are allowed to pile up. It is something the group actively refuses to let you keep. Then the sun goes down, and the single most important work of the day begins. That is not a joke, and we know it because someone bothered to listen. The anthropologist Polly Wiessner recorded what the Jew Howanzi talked about by daylight and compared it to what they talked about by firelight. In the daytime, the talk was practical and a little gossipy. Who went where, who is annoyed with whom, where the food is, who said what to whom. But at night, around the fire, the whole tone lifted off the ground. People told stories. They spoke of relatives far away and ancestors long dead, of the spirit world, of journeys and songs and the very shape of the world itself. Do you see what that fire was actually doing? It was stretching the day out past the reach of the sun. And in that extra borrowed hour, your ancestors built the invisible thing that held them all together. Shared stories. Shared meaning. A felt sense of being one people rather than a loose pile of strangers. James Suzman, who has spent decades living among the Jew/Howanzi, argues that this rhythm is far closer to the true factory setting of a human being than anything in your current week. Not the grind. This. Now here is the twist that should keep you awake tonight. For 100 years, the story ran the other way around. We imagined the deep past as brutal and frantic, a short and desperate scramble simply to survive, and we cast ourselves as the rescued ones, lifted up out of all that misery by progress. The evidence quietly says the reverse is true. It was farming, not foraging, that chained the human day to the ground. When people settled down to grow crops around 12,000 years ago, the workload did not shrink, it detonated. More hours bent over the same stubborn patch of soil. Harder, more repetitive, more punishing labor. Narrower diets built on 1 or 2 crops instead of dozens of wild foods. New diseases that swept through crowded, settled villages. And for the very first time in the human story, the ability to store up a surplus, which meant, for the very first time, that one person could quietly own far more than another. The long, easy hours of your ancestors did not survive the invention of the farm. And in a strange way, they have never fully come back. So look at your own day one more time. You own machines that wash your clothes, cook your food, and carry you across whole cities in minutes. You hold more raw power in a single hand than any emperor who ever lived. And yet you work longer hours than a person who hunted with a wooden spear. You eat more of your meals alone than they ever did. And you scroll past 1,000 human faces in a single day, while truly knowing almost none of them. The tools that promised to hand you their freedom somehow delivered the exact opposite. Packed days, hollow evenings, and a low constant hum of never quite being finished. Your ancestors were not clumsy first drafts of you, killing time in the dark until civilization finally arrived to save them. They had already solved the thing you are still chasing with apps and productivity hacks and 3 days off in the summer. Enough food. Enough rest. And long, unhurried hours spent with the people they loved most. So tomorrow, when the alarm rips you out of sleep and the demands begin before your feet even touch the floor, remember what you came from. For 300,000 years, a human being woke up when their body was ready, with no alarm, no schedule, and a whole long day that belonged entirely to them. Maybe they were never the primitive ones. Maybe, all along, the strange one has been you.